Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to TinyBlueGames. My name, of course, is Cesar Chris, and today we're talking about Guild Wars 2. And specifically, we're going to be talking about a piece of content in Guild Wars 2 that's kind of been forgotten about, and those are, of course, dungeons. Now, dungeons were originally launched as the end game content for Guild Wars 2, and I mean, when I started the game, I assumed that, these were the set of dungeons that were there at launch, and then we'd introduce new dungeons to the game. Uh, that's not exactly what happened. They've kind of been scrapped to the side, although they're still frequented by quite a few people. They have definitely been, the forgotten about content in Guild Wars 2. And what's most interesting about dungeons is that they're probably the most polarizing part of content for the Guild Wars 2 community, where there's a bunch of people who absolutely love them and are pissed that they've been sort of scrapped to the side. And there's a bunch of people who really didn't like them and are very happy to have other things to play. And I kind of find myself in the middle of it, and let me just defend that before we get started. So I started the game when it launched, and I was like, yo, dungeons are super great. I had a lot of fun leveling with them. I had a lot of fun going through them, getting my exotic gear at level 80. However, I did eventually have all my exotic gear and was like, yo, why am I running these dungeons now? I mean, you get gold, sure, that's fine, but there's really little incentive to do it unless I just want cosmetic stuff from all the other dungeons, which, fine, that would be okay for Guild Wars 2 too. But even then, it wouldn't take that long to do. Now, what I assumed they would do is that they would add new dungeons. Maybe, I mean, we knew kind of that there wasn't going to be a gear treadmill per se. Of course, then Fractals kind of introduced a gear treadmill without an actual, traditional treadmill where they have the agony resistance that is only, valuable within the actual Fractals itself. So that was a very clean system, and I think, dungeons needed something like that. So instead of actually just, trying to beat it into dungeons, they made up a whole new system that incorporated it from the start, which I think was a smart way to go. The things that dungeons did very well was the exploration and the depth that you could add to a specific story, a specific area. And this is kind of the sad part of, the reasons I'm upset that they're gone is that you miss that exploration, you miss that depth. And for a long time, I actually thought, we should just completely get rid of dungeons because I hate them. We should add, just chop them up and make them into fractals as best we can. But now I'm much more of a statement that dungeons can serve a good place in the game. But they just have to be used well. We have to look at dungeons as the first tier of endgame content. So it would go dungeons, fractals, raids. And then specifically, we have to look at dungeons as an exploration tool. So I think particularly interesting would be having dungeons as a way to tell new stories in expansions. So in an expansion map, maybe... or an expansion overall, maybe there's one or two dungeons that are added. And these are specifically used to help explore a story within that expansion or help explore a map within that expansion. For instance, in the Path of Fire expansion, maybe I'd say they'd probably want one in the first map to really, drive some people in, especially during the tests and stuff like that. Maybe there's a story that talks about somewhere deep in the mines or something like that, the Crystal Oasis, or something specific about that branded pyramid, or something like that that's very interesting, and tell a few different stories. There'd still be paths and stuff like that. I think that would be a really great tool for them. I think that they should all still reward exotic gear, but the dungeons themselves could be a very good way to reward any new runes, any new sigils coming into the game, and any new stat types to the game. This would be a very good way to reward that. And as someone who does, do fractals and raids, I think having, a way to get exotic, or the inscriptions for stats and stuff like that from dungeons would not be an issue for me. I don't know if the rest of the community feels that way, but I would like it. And I'd also enjoy it more, I think, than kind of the crafting way that we've seen. Like with, Viper stats, you have to go and speak to someone in the open world and get some open world currency and then, craft it. But let's be honest, are you getting Vipers? I mean, people who strictly do open world might care about Vipers a bit. Like, yes, they might care about Vipers, but a lot of the people who care about Vipers are the people who are doing instance content. So I think if there was a place for it to fit into that instance content chain, if you did it in dungeons, it would work really well. Now, that's where I think dungeons would fit in really well. I think they should keep the same sort of system, the exploration. The thing I hate the most about dungeons, and this is the controversial point that a lot of people have, is I hate the fact that people usually just run through dungeons. Like, they usually skip over content. You'll notice this with pretty much any dungeon you join. There's big stretches of it where everyone groups together and sprints past all the enemies instead of killing them because it's faster. And I get why it's, obviously you want to do it because it's faster. And then on a more, more Guild Wars 2 level, it's fun to sort of, work together with the other classes. Some of them have stealth, some of them have swiftness and stability, and that's how you are able to run through it. Like, I do get that that's a cool part of the game. What this hurts, though, is it hurts new players getting into dungeons. And I think that dungeons should be, the most training wheels possible for endgame content. So specifically, we can't have groups where half the people are extremely experienced and want to run through everything without a trouble, and then the other half wants to take their time and explore the dungeon and kill things and really go at their own pace. And if they're doing this run thing, they're gonna die. This is actually, the situation I just described is what happens in dungeons now. If you join an Ascalon Catacombs dungeon, path 1 kind of thing, and even if it says, if it just says path 1, sometimes you get in there and people are like, oh yeah, we're gonna, skip through things and do this, do that. And then the other people that are just joining to do path 1, for the first time and are decent, like they're great. They've got a good spec. They've got a good, gear. They're ready to kill things. They've just never ran through everything. It irritates the shit out of the people that are wanting to run things to actually kill things and stuff like that. And it's stupid. And then you finally convince the people to run through the things, and they aren't, they've never done it before, so they end up dying a few times, and you have to wait for them to respawn and try to get through it in themselves, and then it takes longer than had you killed everything. So at that point, you're like, if it was going to take longer this way anyways, why didn't we just kill everything in the first part? And then they argue, you should be good enough to, run through here. I don't know. That's the part I really dislike about dungeons. I think if they are to implement them, and I think they should. I think they should implement, 1 to 2 per expansion just to really explore certain ideas. I also think out of all the content, Fractals is good during, regular releases. I think that dungeons would be good if you added them to a open world map, like, a living story map. Say during Living Story Season 3, if, in the third map, which was Bitterfrost Frontier, there was a dungeon entrance that went deeper north. And you could get a lot more story with the Sons of Sonir and like Jormeg and all that. I think that would have been a very cool thing. I don't think they don't need nearly as many coming out as raids and fractals, but if they add like 1, on each living story and then maybe 1 on each expansion, I think the community would be pretty happy with that. So that's really what I think about it. I do think they need to find a way to solve the imbalance of new players and old players coming to them. Maybe they make it so that during certain parts of it you can't stealth, or maybe you're more rewarded for killing the monsters. Maybe the more monsters you kill, the better drops you have, or they have a chance to drop the tokens themselves, which makes it more rewarding to kill those monsters. These are all options. I don't know. What do you guys think in the comments below? Do you think there's a way that you could convince all these really experienced groups to not just sprint through dungeons and just walk slowly? I'm not really sure myself, but I think that's maybe the best way to do it. I mean, as it stands right now, the people who run dungeons are the really experienced people, and that's kind of the difficulty. But there is reasons for new people to come in. Like, they do give you some pretty good gold if you wanted to. Not that it's the best gold in the game. You could find better sources, and that's a shame for some people. But I don't think dungeons should be the absolute best dungeon or the best gold farm. The biggest reason I go into dungeons is to get specific runes or sigils. Specifically for monk runes, you also need the ones for what is it? Nightmare. You need those ones. You need the ones for Con DPS, assuming they use the same runes they did. But there's a few different sigils or runes you need from there, and that's what keeps me coming in there. And because I don't have legendary armor, I delete them eventually and do need to do it again. Now, once more people have legendary armor, this also removes any reason to go back and get those runes, which is more unfortunate. So it's there needs to be more reasons to go in there, and I think that they need to use dungeons as a tool for exploration. That needs to be the main reason people want to go in there, to get more of the story, more of the area, because I think that's what dungeons do the best. Now, I do have a whole nother topic where I want to discuss the fact that agony, what you find in Fractals of the Mist, should be applied to dungeons, fractals, and raids, and it should be a building stat type that happens throughout all instance content, allowing a treadmill of sorts for instance content that's not at all effective in the open world. And I think that would be great for Guild Wars 2, because it would really give the people who are into the instance content and want longevity in terms of that something to do, but would also not force anyone who's not into instance content to really work hard to get there. And when I'm saying a loose treadmill, I mean as loose as it's been over the years, where they just add maybe an extra slot to a few pieces of gear every so often, which has really been the case with Fractals as it is. And I don't think that's too much to push on the community. And I honestly think the raid community would be very open to it, as a lot of them have already finished a lot of their long-term goals for raids and now are looking for new things to do. The beauty of I don't want to get too much into it. I'll do a whole video on this. The beauty of agony being, though, that it doesn't necessarily make the fights terribly easier once you have enough agony. It reduces extra damage, which is pretty interesting. But we'll discuss that in another video. Share your thoughts on dungeons. This has kind of been my random thoughts while doing a dungeon video. So if you have anything else to add to it, do say so in the comments below. If you're new to this channel, do subscribe. We do a lot of MMO content, but specifically Guild Wars 2 and WildStar is our favorite things to talk about. So if you like that, subscribe, like it, and I'll see you in the next video, guys. Thanks for watching.